Brian's life was about to change. The letter, the email, the phone call, however it had come, it didn't matter. The job offer was real. It was from a prestigious consulting firm, the kind that people spent years trying to get into, the kind that promised more than just a paycheck. It promised a career, a future. After years of setbacks, of fighting tooth and nail to stay afloat, Brian had finally caught the break he had been waiting for. He dreamed of this moment countless times. When he was working those dead-end jobs, when he was stuck in the rut, when he barely had enough to make rent, this moment was the one thing he kept in his mind, the idea that someday his hard work would pay off. This job offer wasn't just a piece of paper. It was his chance to step into a new life, to put the past behind him and start something that had real potential. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating that. He had planned it all out. A celebratory dinner for two. He knew exactly what to make. Natalie's favorite dish, the one they used to have on those rare nights when they both had time to relax. The wine was ready. The table was set. He'd spent hours getting everything perfect. It wasn't just about the job. It was about sharing his success with her, the person who had always been there, the person he'd supported through all her causes, all her fights. Tonight was supposed to be about them, about moving forward together. As he moved around the kitchen, setting the plates and glasses, he thought about how much had changed in their lives. Natalie, his girlfriend of 3 years, had always been the one with a clear sense of purpose. She had a cause. She fought for social justice, for the marginalized. Brian had always admired that about her, but it wasn't always easy to keep up. Sometimes it felt like his own dreams were put on hold, lost in the shadow of her activism. But tonight, that was going to change. This was his moment, and he was eager to share it with her. The sound of the door opening broke his thoughts. He looked up to see Natalie walking in. She was wearing her usual energy, her intense focus evident even before she fully entered the room. Her eyes softened when she saw the dinner laid out, but there was a slight hesitation in her step. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down her bag and glancing at the table. "I've got something to tell you," Brian said, his heart beating a little faster. He was excited, almost giddy. "I got the job. The job I've been working for. The one at the consulting firm. They offered me the position." There was a brief pause. Brian watched her carefully, waiting for the excitement, the joy that he had imagined would follow. But instead, her expression changed. It wasn't exactly disbelief, but it wasn't exactly joy either. Her brow furrowed, just a little, as she absorbed the news. "A consulting firm?" she asked, her voice quieter now, more uncertain. Brian's excitement began to wane, and he quickly stepped forward. "Yeah, it's one of the top firms. I've worked so hard for this, Nat. It's a real opportunity. You know what this means, right? This could change everything. For me. For us." But Natalie didn't immediately respond. She paused, looking at him with a sense of guarded hesitation. Then she shook her head slightly, her expression hardening. "I don't know if I can support this." Brian's stomach dropped. "What do you mean? It's a huge opportunity, Nat. This is what I've been waiting for. I finally got a real chance at a career. I know what it means for you," she said, her voice tightening. "But you're not seeing the bigger picture, Brian. Do you even know what kind of company you're talking about?" Brian blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "It's just a consulting firm. They work with businesses, helping them grow, helping them improve." "This is exactly the kind of job I need." "I'm not talking about the job itself," Natalie cut in. "I'm talking about the company. You're going to work for a firm that's involved in evictions and corporate exploitation. They profit off people losing their homes, Brian. How can you not see that?" Brian took a step back. The words hit harder than he expected. He had thought that this moment would be a celebration, but now it felt like everything was unraveling. I wasn't thinking about it that way, he said, struggling to find the right words. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not part of that. I'll be helping businesses grow. This is about my career, my future. But that's exactly the problem, Natalie said, her voice growing more intense. You can't just ignore what they stand for. You're going to be part of that system. It's not just a job. It's a betrayal of everything we've fought for. Brian's frustration began to rise. He had always supported her activism, always stood by her side through every protest, every cause. He had been proud to be part of her world, even if it meant sacrificing his own ambitions. But now, when it was his turn to move forward, when it was his chance to have something for himself, how would you feel if your partner hid their affair for months or even years? Write in the comments. She was pushing him away. Natalie, I've supported you. I've been there for every protest, every campaign. I've done everything for you and your causes, he said, his voice cracking. Now, when I finally have something for myself, you're telling me I can't have it. You're telling me this isn't enough? Her eyes were cold now, her arms crossed tightly. It's not just about you, Brian. It's about the world we're living in. And you're choosing to be part of the system that's making it worse. I can't be with someone who's okay with that. I can't stand by and watch you sell your soul just because it's a good opportunity. The words stung harder than he could have imagined. This wasn't just a job offer anymore. It wasn't just a career move. It was a test of everything he believed in, of everything they had been building together. He hadn't expected it to come down to this. I'm not selling my soul, Nat. I'm just trying to build a future. For us, Brian said, his voice low but firm. She shook her head slowly, the disappointment in her eyes now clear. I can't support this. Not when you're willing to turn your back on everything we've fought for. I can't be with you if you choose this. Brian stood there in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. This wasn't the celebration he had imagined. This was a confrontation, and it was happening right in front of him. He had spent so long waiting for his chance, and now, when it finally came, it felt like he was being forced to choose between the woman he loved and the future he wanted. Natalie's expression grew colder, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. I can't believe you're even considering this, she said. You're willing to work for a company that's been involved in evictions and corporate exploitation. How can you support that? I'm not supporting that, Brian replied, his voice rising slightly. I'm not working for them to do that. I'm not making the decisions that affect people's lives. I'm trying to build a career, to get out of this cycle. Do you really believe that? Natalie's voice grew sharper. You're just going to ignore everything they stand for because it benefits you? You've spent so much time fighting against that system, and now you're willing to just join it? Brian clenched his fists. I'm not part of their exploitation. I'm trying to make something of myself, something real. Why is that such a problem for you? Because you're selling out, Brian, she said, her tone bitter. This is the very thing we've spent years fighting against. How can you ignore that? I'm not ignoring it, Brian snapped. I've supported you for years, Nat. I've been there for your protests, your campaigns. But this is my chance to have something for myself, to finally step forward. And you can't even be happy for me. She shook her head. I'm not happy for you because you're not seeing what this means. You can't keep acting like everything is fine just because you've gotten a job with a high salary. You're part of the system now, Brian. I don't see it that way, he replied, frustration bubbling in his voice. This is my career. It's my future. I can't keep living paycheck to paycheck forever. I need stability. Stability? At the cost of your values? She countered. What's next, Brian? When do you stop making compromises for your career? You're going to end up just like the rest of them, selling your soul for a paycheck. I'm not selling anything, Brian said, his voice cracking slightly. I'm just trying to make a better life for myself. I can't keep living in your shadow forever, Nat. I can't keep sacrificing everything for your causes. Natalie's face tightened, her jaw set in determination. If you can't see why this is wrong, then I don't think we have anything left to say. Brian's heart pounded in his chest. So what? You're going to walk away because I chose a job over your ideals? I'm not walking away, Brian. You're the one walking away from everything we've fought for, she said quietly, the weight of her words sinking in. You're the one choosing the job, the money, the system. Brian's eyes narrowed. I'm not choosing them, Nat. I'm choosing myself. The silence between them was heavy, and Natalie finally turned away. If that's your choice, then there's nothing more to discuss. The words landed like a slap. Brian stood still, watching as the finality of the moment settled in. The tension between them was undeniable, and there was nothing left to do but let it play out. Choose, Natalie said, her voice firm. The job or me? Brian stood there, his hands slightly trembling. The ultimatum had been made, and there was no turning back. The decision had to be made, and he knew it. He had worked for this moment, and now it was time to take responsibility for his choice. He wasn't sure what would happen after this, but it didn't matter. He had to make a decision for himself. He took a deep breath and met her gaze. I choose the job. Natalie's face hardened. So, you're choosing a company that profits off of everything we've been fighting against. You're willing to be a part of that system? Brian's chest tightened, but he didn't back down. I'm choosing a future, Nat. I can't keep living this way. I need something real. I've been struggling for years. This is my chance. And what about everything we've fought for? She asked, her voice colder now. How can you turn your back on all of it for a paycheck? I'm not turning my back on anything, Brian replied. I've supported your causes for years. Now it's my turn. I can't keep compromising my happiness for your ideals. I've been doing that for too long. Natalie shook her head slowly. I can't stand by and watch you make this decision. You're choosing them over me, over everything we built together. Brian felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not choosing them, Nat. I'm choosing myself. I've spent too long putting my life on hold for you. Now it's time for me to move forward. Her eyes flashed with hurt. If that's what you want, then we're done. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Brian stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had made his choice, but the weight of it didn't hit him until now. Natalie turned and walked toward the door. Brian didn't move. He watched her go, each step sounding louder than the last. When she reached the door, she paused and looked back at him. You've made your choice, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She left, and the door clicked shut behind her. Brian stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been. He had made his decision, but as the silence settled in, doubt began to creep in. Had he made the right choice?